And in some mysterious way, Philip is then transported away. Now that actually has never happened to me in life. I've never wanted it to happen at a baptism. I do confess I've been to some weddings where I wish that wasn't possible. And that I could, once it was done, just be gone. And then Paul writes about love. Sorry, John writes about love. And it's this abiding thing that John gets into with love. The Gospel of John, Jesus carries on about, you'll abide in me, I'll abide in you, we abide in each other, and it gets on this sort of a role thing. And it's picked up in the first letter as well, and we wonder, what exactly does that mean? What does it mean to abide in somebody else? Does it mean that you go over to their house and you never leave, and you eat their food, and you do whatever, you use their stuff? Is that abiding in a loving way? Does it mean you find somebody and you're attracted to them, and you say, well, I'm going to grab onto them just as tight as I can. They'll never change. Does it mean that you let your own needs get in the way? And then sometimes you find yourself at some point down the road in a place where that person is gone. And now you're realizing how unloving you can be. Worst of all, do we think it just means about relationships? In the Revised Standard Version, and in a couple other older versions, I think the New American Standard is one. This first line in John's Gospel reads, Jesus said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. I suppose it's a little bit of an antiquated language. In some of the contemporary translations, in my mind, it gets even worse. And it says, I'm the vine, my Father's the gardener. And when I was first really coming to understand Scripture, at that zealous point, when you're going to buy one copy of every translation of the Bible you can find, at least. And if there's one in a different cover, you might need that one too. One of my criteria for whether I might like this translation was to look at, believe it or not, at John 15:1. And if it said vine dresser, I thought I might like this. Just kind of a really odd, twisted thing, but it's indicative of how that resonated within me. And I always had this image of a gardener, or even a vine grower, being someone who mucks fertilizer, who digs in the mud, which is what a gardener does, and I suppose what a vine grower does. But to me, a vine dresser was a lot like the people you see with those little bonsai trees, who delicately prune certain parts of the tree that it might grow, and who watch over it lovingly and shape it, and really there constantly in a loving, supportive way, and yet in the end, no matter what, of course, it's dependent on the tree to a large extent, whether it's going to flourish or not. What does it mean in terms of love to be grafted in? You can look at those those parts of this gospel reading that seem to say that God is coming along with a rather large machete, looking for the opportunity to lop off branches of the tree and throw them into the fire. But if you've ever had a tree, or almost any plant, you know that you don't cut off what's alive. If you want the plant to thrive, or the tree to thrive, or the vine to thrive, you cut off what's dead. And you do it gently and not indiscriminately, because it's about all the parts continually. And it's about, in this metaphor that actually is one of Paul's favorite for the church, about grafting in new branches. And the one thing about a vine or a tree or any plant is that the parts all need each other to continue. For me, within this image, there is a huge message of interconnectedness. And the reality that not only are each one of us in this room connected, but we're connected to the environment around us. We're connected to all of our friends and family. And if we trace the root back far enough, we're connected to everyone. I heard a story on the radio the other day about, and I don't remember their names, forgive me, but there was an African American woman who wanted to trace her genealogy. She was living in New York. And there was a good old Southern boy, farmer in the Southeast, who wanted to trace his genealogy. And as they did the research 8 generations back, they found they were connected. And the person that was doing the reporting said that if you go back 8 generations, you have 256 grandparents. Or, great times 7 grandparents. It's enormous. And I honestly don't remember the number, she said, if you went back 16. There's a very real physical way in which we are all interconnected. Not just genealogically, but in terms of the world we share, the people we contact. And so that call to abide in love really affects much more than somebody we might just want to be with tonight. But it affects everything we say and do. In the end, I believe you can only understand love if you understand that it has to be for all people. And if you subtract from the cultural notions of love those things that would make it impossible to be for all people. In other words, quite frankly, sexuality and the desire to sleep with somebody can't be about this kind of love that interconnects us all. Even the most indiscriminate person has only so many hours in a day. And so that love has to be about something else. I think it has to be about that image of that bonsai tree. And the fact that we're all little branches on that tree. And we're all so fragile that if someone comes along indiscriminately and starts poking at us, we'll fall off. And that the will of God and the work of God is to guard that tree. Not, as some people would say, to lop off the ugly ones, the ones who don't belong to the right church, the ones who don't have a good job, the ones who don't have a socioeconomic status. But if something's dead, we remove it. And if something's alive, we nurture it. Then we do really abide in each other because we're connected for our very life essence. Then what nurtures the tree nurtures us. And the reality is we're all part of that very large tree. And so if I try to cut you off, what I'm really doing is cutting myself off. And I guarantee you the dead branch that falls from the tree, look at me.